My fiance's mom had always looked down on me. I faked a breakup in front of the family and let her take care of my fiance. After a week, she apologized and begged me to come back. What kind of woman pretends to dump her fiancé just to make his mom cry on New Year's Eve? Apparently me. I didn't plan to be petty. I didn't set out to become a low-key Bond villain at a family party. But when someone treats you like you're an unpaid intern in your own relationship for long enough, something snaps. And what snapped in me was the last fragile thread of be the bigger person I'd been clinging to for over 2 years. Let's start from the top. I've been with my fiancé, let's call him Evan, for almost 4 years. We're one of those modern couples that boomers like to mock in think pieces. Evan works in IT and brings home about 70% of our household income. I work in customer service, the kind where you're on your feet all day, dodging entitled customers and smiling through the emotional equivalent of a wood chipper. I pull in the other 30% of our income and do the other 70% of the chores. It's not exact math, but it works. We've talked about it, we're happy with it. Enter his mother, also known in this story as my personal villain origin story. From the moment she met me, she decided I was not quite right for her golden boy. It wasn't overt at first. It was a look here, a comment there. Oh, that's your job. How sweet. Or, it's nice you help out around the house, that's what women are best at anyway. Once she literally said to my face that Evan deserved a woman who irons. I don't iron, I refuse to iron. I'd rather fight a raccoon with my bare hands than iron a single man's shirt. Evan didn't share her mindset. He was appalled honestly. But standing up to your mom is harder when your dad's the human equivalent of a silent screensaver and your brother and his wife are the only two family members who treat you like an adult. Evan would push back when she crossed a line, sure, but mostly it was half-hearted. He thought avoiding conflict would make it settle down. It didn't. It just taught her that I had no boundaries. I tried at first, I really did. I brought her flowers, asked about her hobbies. I once even helped organize a family reunion brunch because she said she was overwhelmed. She wasn't, she just wanted to see if I'd do it. But every olive branch got set on fire. I was too loud. I talked too much about work. I cooked weird. Apparently roasted vegetables and quinoa are threats to tradition. The kicker came last New Year's Eve. Evan and I were at his parents' house doing the thing where everyone pretends to like each other for the sake of tradition and cheap champagne. His mom, in her glittery cardigan and judgmental glory, leaned over during dinner and said, I kid you not. You know, Evan, it's probably time you find a wife who's more traditional. Someone who'll let you relax when you come home. I stared at her, fork midair, and then I smiled. You're right, I said. Evan deserves better. I think we need to break up. You could have heard a pin drop. Then the chaos started. Evan's eyes bulged like I'd smacked him. His mom looked like she'd just swallowed a porcupine. His dad blinked, probably wondering if the cable had gone out. And Evan's brother, bless that man, said, Damn, Mom, you really outdid yourself. You happy now? That moment sparked something in me. Not rage, not grief, power. I realized I could walk away and let her deal with the consequences of her passive-aggressive campaign. And that's exactly what I did. I stood up, kissed Evan on the cheek, and walked out. No yelling, no tears, just the clink of cutlery and the sound of his mom whispering, oh no, oh no, oh no, like a spell she couldn't undo. Of course, what she didn't know, what nobody knew, except Evan, his brother, and his wife, was that we'd planned this. Yep, we staged the breakup, a fake breakup, a controlled demolition of one very toxic power dynamic. And before you judge me or do whatever, I'm not your mom. Understand this? I had tried every polite, reasonable way to earn that woman's respect. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled. I put up with the jokes. She didn't want a daughter-in-law. She wanted a live-in maid with a silent mouth and zero opinions. So I stopped playing the game. I played a better one instead. And that's how the beginning of the end started. It wasn't always like this. When I first met Evan's mom, let's just call her Margaret because it fits, and because mother-in-law who tried it is too long, things were frosty but manageable. We'd only been dating 6 months, and she was on her best fake behavior. You know, the kind, brittle smile arms that squeeze just a little too tight, and phrases like, oh, so you're the girl Evan's been seeing, laced with the kind of warmth you find in a dentist's chair. I didn't mind it initially. I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe she was one of those hyper-protective moms who just needed time to adjust to the idea of her little boy growing up. I get it. I really do. I just didn't realize that to Margaret, adjusting meant slowly waging psychological warfare over the course of 4 years. At first, it was the small things, tiny digs that sounded like compliments if you weren't paying attention. That's a cute dress, it looks very affordable. You're so lucky you don't work full-time, more time to focus on the home. Oh, Evan told me you made dinner last week. He said it was interesting. I'd smile, laugh awkwardly, tell myself it was just generational. I didn't want to be that girlfriend who doesn't get along with his mom. I'd seen that movie before. Spoiler alert, she always loses. So I played nice. I played gracious. I baked cookies. I asked about her church group. I complimented her terrible Pinterest centerpieces like they were works of art. I kept receipts for every olive branch I extended, thinking one day she'd come around. Spoiler alert, she didn't. Instead, she escalated. By our second year together, I'd moved in with Evan, and we'd hit a rhythm that worked. He worked in IT and pulled long hours troubleshooting broken servers and answering phone calls from people who still think the internet is down means they need to reboot their fridge. I worked the closing shift at a cafe that was basically a glorified fight club with espresso machines, and then I'd come home, toss a meal together, vacuum fold laundry, maybe even rub Evan's neck while he tried to beat Wordle in 3 tries. I was tired. He was tired. We were functioning adults. But in Margaret's world, I was freeloading. You should really consider scaling back on that little job, she told me one Thanksgiving. It's sweet that you want to contribute, but don't forget your real duties. I asked her what she meant by real duties. She just smiled and handed me a dish towel. Evan, bless him, tried to defend me. But he's a peacekeeper at heart, the kind who thinks conflict will just drift away if you don't breathe on it too hard. I kept telling myself it wasn't his fault, that it was on her, that if I could just get her to see me, really see me, she'd come around. I even thought we were making progress at one point. We went to a family wedding together. I helped Margaret pick out a dress, did her makeup, even fixed her scarf mid-ceremony like some kind of fashion hostage. For a whole weekend, she was civil. Pleasant, even. I thought we'd turned a corner. Then the day after, she told Evan I had a loud laugh and that I was a little too bossy with waiters. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with a mother-in-law. I was dealing with a gatekeeper. See? Margaret had this fantasy version of Evan's future, a soft-spoken, apron-wearing housewife who adored her son and called her weekly for pot roast recipes. Someone who'd consider herself lucky to marry into the family. Someone who'd fall in line. I was never going to be that woman. I didn't iron, I didn't defer, I didn't treat Evan like a prize I had to maintain to keep. We were partners equals. I called him out when he left dishes in the sink, and he made me tea when I looked like I was about to slap a customer through the espresso bar. We had each other's backs. But Margaret saw every boundary I set as a red flag, and over time the digs turned into manipulation. One Christmas she called Evan crying, saying I'd made her feel excluded because I didn't ask her opinion on table decor. Spoiler, we used paper plates. Another time, she showed up at our apartment with a care package for Evan, which was just a bunch of folded button-down shirts and homemade meatloaf, and told me I figured he was probably missing a real home-cooked meal. Evan told her it was inappropriate. She said I was being sensitive, that I didn't understand how mothers love. I started pulling away. It wasn't just the comments anymore. It was the emotional fatigue, the constant tightrope walking, the invisible scale where every chore I did or didn't do, every word I spoke, was weighed and deemed lacking. But I didn't want to be the one to break the family. Evan's brother Matt and his wife Sarah were genuinely great people. Sarah especially, she got it. She saw Margaret for what she was, a guilt bomb wrapped in pearls and passive aggression. She started texting me little support messages after family gatherings. "You good? I saw that look she gave you. You handled that casserole thing like a pro. It helped. A lot." Then one night, Sarah and I were sitting on the back patio during Evan's dad's birthday dinner, after Margaret had made a joke about how some women just aren't built to host, and I told her I was done. Like done. "I don't want to leave Evan," I said, "but I swear, if she says one more thing about real women, I'm going to lose it." Sarah looked at me, wine in hand, and said, "So make her." I laughed. She didn't. "No, seriously," she said. "What if she thinks you're gone, just for a little while? Let her sit in the mess she made." I blinked. "Are you suggesting I fake a breakup?" "Not just you," she said, smirking. Matt and I will back it. Evan will play along. Give her a little taste of what it's like when the undeserving girl disappears. It sounded absurd. It sounded petty. It sounded kind of perfect. Evan was hesitant at first. "You want me to lie to my mom?" he asked. "She's been emotionally blackmailing us for years," Sarah said flatly. "Call it performance art." We decided we'd wait. One final test, one last gathering, New Year's Eve. And let me tell you, Margaret didn't disappoint. New Year's Eve was always a big deal in Evan's family. Not because they partied particularly hard, it wasn't champagne towers and ball drops, but because it was her event. Margaret liked throwing one of those classy but approachable holiday dinners, which basically meant catered meatballs in a slow cooker, tacky gold streamers, and a guest list she personally curated for maximum image control. Sarah called it Suburban Hunger Games. I called it Hell in Heels. This time, I came prepared. I wore my most non-traditional outfit, high-waisted black slacks, a backless top, and the brightest red lipstick I owned, all things Margaret had previously side-eyed into oblivion. I brought sparkling cider instead of wine because she once said only children drink juice at parties. And I showed up with 0 casseroles, 0 apologies, and 0 tolerance left. Margaret greeted me at the door like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Her eyes scanned me top to bottom. I saw her catch on the bare back and almost say something, but instead she smiled and said, "Well, that's festive." "Thanks," I said, stepping inside. "You know me, just trying to be helpful around the holidays." Evan gave my hand a quick squeeze and we stepped into the usual tension factory that was her living room. Gold tinsel, folding chairs disguised as extra seating, some distant cousin making passive-aggressive comments about Gen Z over potato salad. The whole show. Everything was going according to plan. We'd all agreed the moment would come during dinner. That's when Margaret would be at her most performative, full-audience glass of wine, ego inflated from the illusion of control. And like clockwork, she delivered. So she said, leaning across the table, smile gleaming like a wolf in pearls, "Evan, don't you think it's about time you found someone who's a little more traditional?" She said it like a joke, like she hadn't said versions of it before, like she wasn't trying to provoke me again. But this time, I didn't flinch. I turned to Evan, smiled sweetly, and said, "You know what? She's right." Everyone stopped eating. Sarah froze with a fork halfway to her mouth. Matt looked at me like I'd just spoken fluent Mandarin. I stood up. "I think we need to break up," I said calmly, placing my napkin on the table. "You deserve someone who fits better into your family, someone who irons." Margaret's face collapsed in on itself like a bad soufflé. "Wait, what? No, I didn't mean—" I know I said, keeping my tone icy. "But it's clear I'm not what this family wants, and honestly I'm tired of pretending I don't notice." Evan stood too, looking stricken. "No, please, don't do this, not over her." Cue his best desperate boyfriend act. I'll admit, he missed his calling. The man could have won a People's Choice Award with that performance. Margaret reached for my arm. Wait, please, can we talk privately? I think we've talked enough," I said, brushing past her. "Good luck finding that traditional wife." And I left. Out the front door, into the cold. Got in the car and drove 2 blocks to Sarah's place, where she had wine-fuzzy socks and the wildest grin I'd ever seen. "You're a monster," she whispered, handing me a glass. "She walked into it herself," I said, collapsing onto the couch. "True, but damn, that was Oscar-level petty." Back at the party, things were reportedly wild. Evan told me later that Margaret had a full-on spiral the minute I left. She tried to downplay it first. "I'm sure they'll work it out, they always fight," but the panic set in fast. Especially when Evan announced he was too upset to be here and stormed off to crash at his parents' house, which, by the way, was also part of the plan. See, Evan didn't actually move back in with Margaret, he just stayed the night to make it look real. But the next morning he told her he didn't feel like driving all the way back to our place and asked if she minded him crashing a few more nights. She was thrilled. Her baby boy back under her roof. She practically threw a party. That is, until he started acting like he was still in a relationship. Specifically, the kind of relationship where the woman, aka me, did 70% of everything. "Hey, Mom," he said the next morning. "Can you iron this shirt? OP always does it for me, and I have an early meeting." Margaret laughed. "You're funny. I'm serious." She tried to ignore it. So the next day, he left his dishes in the sink, asked her to pack his lunch, asked her to pick up his dry cleaning. He even brought out a half-finished crossword puzzle and said, "Can you help me with these last few OP?" And I always do them together after dinner. By day 3, she was starting to sweat. She called me once. I didn't answer. She texted. I didn't respond. She tried Sarah. Sarah told her I was still processing. Evan kept escalating. He left his laundry on the stairs. He asked for help steaming his pants. He claimed he needed emotional support for a work burnout and requested she make him her soothing tea, which, spoiler alert, she had never actually made before. But she did it. By day 5, Margaret was unraveling. She texted me again, this time longer. A message that started with, "I know I've made mistakes," and ended with, "Please just talk to me, he's being difficult." Sarah sent me screenshots. I felt a little bad, but mostly I felt seen. Let me be clear, this wasn't about punishing Margaret. It was about showing her what she'd done. About taking the invisible labor I'd been doing for years and letting her carry it. Not out of malice, but out of demonstration. Because that's what it took. 8 days in, she showed up at my workplace. I work retail. Not glamorous, but decent pay and flexible hours. I was folding jeans when she walked in, wild-eyed and holding a paper bag like she was about to surrender in a hostage negotiation. "I need to talk to you," she said, breathless. "I'm working," I said, perfectly polite. "Please." So I stepped into the back, mostly because I didn't want her sobbing in front of the discount bin. She handed me the bag. Inside, a box of C's candy and a note that said, "I'm sorry. I didn't understand." I looked up, and she was already crying. I thought you loved him enough to ignore me," she said, voice shaking. "I thought you'd just deal with it." I stared, and I thought if I made it harder for you, you'd do more. So he could have more time. So I could have more time with him. "You were trying to drive me out," I said flatly. "I thought it would bring him back to me," she whispered. "But he's so lazy. He doesn't do anything." "I thought you were exaggerating." "But you weren't." "No, I wasn't." "He says I owe him," she continued. "He said I owe him for making you leave." I had to choke back a laugh. Not because it was funny exactly, but because the sheer audacity of Evan turning the tables was too perfect. "I miss you," she said. "And he misses you. He's miserable. I'm miserable." And I was wrong. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the years of underhanded remarks, the passive digs, the calculated insults. But it was the first time she'd admitted I had been doing the work. That I was in fact valuable. Necessary. Not just to Evan, but to the whole damn ecosystem she'd taken for granted. I told her I'd think about it. That night I went home. Evan was already there, pacing like a nervous golden retriever. He hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. "I think she's broken," he said. "Good," I said. Then he grinned. "Also, I might have gone a little overboard. I asked her to iron my socks." "You're insane." "She did it." We laughed for 10 minutes. By the end of the second week, Margaret had morphed from mother-in-law Zilla to a walking cautionary tale. She had bags under her eyes, her hair looked like it had lost the will to curl, and according to Evan, she'd taken to whispering, "What have I done to herself," while folding towels. If you'd told me last year that this woman, the same woman who once mocked me for using pre-shredded cheese, would beg me to come back with a gift basket and an emotional confession, I'd have laughed in your face and offered you a glass of my delusion. But here we were. And honestly, I didn't know how to feel. I'd won. Technically. I'd pulled off a fake breakup, held my ground, and gotten a formal apology with bonus chocolates. Evan and I had proven our point so thoroughly that Margaret had finally cracked under the pressure of doing the bare minimum and for the first time ever acknowledged the labor I brought to the table. But as I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling while Evan slept beside me, something gnawed at me. This victory. It wasn't clean. It wasn't triumphant. It felt like I'd crossed an invisible line and couldn't quite find my way back. Because here's the thing about revenge, even petty, delicious, justified revenge, it costs something. In the moment, it had felt empowering. Funny even. But now that the adrenaline had drained and the spotlight had dimmed, I was left with questions I didn't know how to answer. Had I become the kind of person who plays emotional chicken with another human being? Was I comfortable manipulating someone, even someone awful, to prove a point? Was I becoming her just with better mascara and sharper strategy? I rolled over and nudged Evan. "Hey," he grunted. "What, did we go too far?" He blinked bleary-eyed. "What? With your mom? This whole thing, did we do too much?" He exhaled, rubbing his face. "Maybe." That wasn't the answer I expected. But he added, sitting up slightly, she needed to see it. "You've tried everything else. Talking, reasoning, crying, avoiding. She just never heard you." I bit my lip. "I know. But I feel like I lost something." "What? The high ground?" He chuckled. "Babe, your mom called me a princess for needing ibuprofen. You lost the high ground years ago." I laughed despite myself, but the feeling lingered. The next day, I got another message from Margaret. This one wasn't an apology. It wasn't dramatic. It was short, blunt, honest. "I won't pretend I understand you, but I want to try. I want to start over." For the first time, I believed her, so I agreed to meet for coffee. Neutral territory. No homes, no Evan, no family dynamics. Just me, her, and a cafe table between us. She showed up 10 minutes early. I showed up 5 minutes late. Petty, I know, but baby steps. She was nervous. I could see it in the way she twisted her napkin into tiny paper ropes. We sat down, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she cleared her throat. "I want to be very clear," she said. "I don't expect you to forgive me, or trust me. But I want to apologize properly. Not because Evan told me to, not because I want him back home, but because I was wrong." I nodded. Let her keep going. I thought if I made things uncomfortable for you, you'd either leave or try harder. And I realize now that was manipulation. That I treated you like an obstacle instead of a person. She took a deep breath. And I also thought I was protecting Evan. From what I don't know. From growing up, maybe. From needing someone. I saw him lean on you and I resented it because I wasn't the one he needed anymore. That hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about ironing and cooking and crossword puzzles. It was about control. About grief in a twisted, displaced way. Margaret hadn't just been judging me. She'd been mourning the role she once played in her son's life and trying to reclaim it by force. "That doesn't excuse how I treated you," she added quickly. "Nothing does. I was cruel, and I'm sorry." It was the first time I'd ever heard her say the word sorry without qualifying it with a but. I let the silence hang between us. Then I said, "I'm not going to forget what you did, but I'm open to a reset. On my terms." She nodded. "Whatever you need." "Okay," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "First term, you don't comment on my work, my clothes, or my cooking. Ever. Fair. Second, no guilt trips. If Evan and I say no to something, the answer is no, understood." Third, I added, raising an eyebrow. "You iron your own damn shirts." She smiled. Just slightly. And for once, it wasn't condescending. Deal. We didn't become best friends after that. There were no long hugs or teary holiday toasts or magical transformations where Margaret suddenly loved tofu and feminism and respected boundaries. No, this isn't that story. This is the kind where the villain doesn't change completely, but she learns not to underestimate the protagonist again. We kept things civil, mutually distant, but functional. At the next family dinner, she didn't say anything about my outfit. She didn't comment on the store-bought dessert I brought. And when Evan complimented my mashed potatoes loudly, she just nodded and passed the salt. Progress. Evan moved back in a few days after the coffee. He'd played his part perfectly, but even he admitted that faking helplessness for 2 weeks had taken a psychological toll. "I never want to pretend to be that useless again," he told me. It scared me how quickly she accepted it. I think that disturbed him more than anything else how ready his mom had been to resume a role she'd supposedly let go of years ago. It's like she'd been waiting for a chance to reassert control, and the second she thought I was out of the picture, she grabbed the wheel. But now, she doesn't drive anymore. At best, she gets to ride in the backseat, seatbelt fastened, hands to herself. And as for me, I'm still working my so-called little job, still wearing my backless tops, still refusing to iron. Evan and I split chores with a little more intentionality now, not out of guilt, but because we both saw how invisible my work had become even to him. He didn't realize how much I buffered his life until he tried to replicate it under someone else's roof. And frankly, I didn't realize how much I needed him to see that until this whole mess forced it into the light. There's something strangely intimate about watching your partner perform a version of you in front of someone who never appreciated the real thing. It's like watching your worth echoed back to you through a pantomime exaggerated, ridiculous, but undeniably real. He had to weaponize his own incompetence just to get his mother to recognize mine as labor. The C's candy still sits in our pantry. I haven't eaten it. Not because I'm above it, but because part of me wants to preserve it. A trophy of sorts. A sugary symbol of justice. Evan calls it the apology basket of legend. I call it karma with a bow. Sometimes when I look at it, I remember how small I felt at the beginning of all this shrinking under Margaret's scrutiny, twisting myself into palatable shapes to win her over. And I remind myself I'm not small. I'm not lucky to be here. I earned my place not just in Evan's life, but in the space I hold unapologetically as his partner, not his servant. Will Margaret slip again? Probably. People don't change overnight, but now she knows there's a line. A real one. One I'm willing to walk away behind and let her sit in the silence she created. And if she forgets, well, I've still got the receipt from that fake breakup. One phone call, and Evan's ironing board gets dusted off again. I don't want to use it. I hope I never have to. But knowing it's there, that's enough. Because respect like C's candy is sweeter when it's earned.